Get ready for the next level play. How can we stay ahead of the transformation? What are the skills and competencies we need to make the big leap forward? How can stakeholders collaborate better? Learn, engage, take action. Listen and interact with keynote speakers, business leaders, and industry experts. Join the virtual 2021 Transformation Summit, July 12 to 15, 2021. Register now for free.
Good morning, everyone. I am DJ, this year's conference chair, and on behalf of the chairman and the board of trustees of the Cebu IT BPM organization, or CIB.O, welcome to day 3 of the 2021 Transformation Summit. In the next 2 hours, we will cover updates on the local economy, digital BPO, developments in NASSCOM research on artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain robotics, virtual reality, and the future of technology. And just like the first 2 days of the summit, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box for those of us who are watching in Zoom. And for those who are watching us live on Facebook, you can key in your questions in the comment section below. Please also hang on until the end of today's session for you to qualify for exciting prizes coming from Globe and Cebu Safari. And for the winners from your previous sessions, please check the details at the CIB.O Facebook page. So is everybody ready? I am. We are all ready. So in day 1 of the Transformation Summit, we talked about the National Economic Forecast. Today, we're going to be closer to home, the regional forecast. Region 7 is composed of Cebu, Bohol, Negros Oriental, and Siquijor. The region is among the most developed and the 4th largest economy in the country, with a huge presence of IT-enabled services. To speak about the economic situation in the region and the next level play, let's welcome to the virtual stage the Assistant Regional Director of the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA Region 7, Dr. Dolores Molintas.
So, good morning. May I present to the members of this distinguished organization, the CIB.O, the Central Visayas Regional Economic Situationer for the first quarter of 2021, covering the economic indicators of the region. What you see on the frame is the record of annual gross regional domestic product of Central Visayas from 2001 to 2020. As you can see, for the past 19 years, the economy of the region has been erratic, but was generally observed to be on an upward trend with an average growth rate of over 6% per annum. Not long ago, however, the Philippine Statistics Authority came out with the 2020 Gross Regional Domestic Product, or GRDP, of the regions. And as expected, the regional economy contracted by 9.9% in 2020, due mainly to the impact of the 2019 pandemic. The figure was slightly higher than the contraction recorded by the national GDP of a negative 9.6%. This 9.9% contraction in the region's GRDP was the only contraction recorded over the 20-year period since 2001. Even during the years of the global pandemic, or the global crisis in 2002 and 2009, the region's GRDP still managed to post a positive growth. This frame shows the performance of regional economies in the country for the period 2019 to 2020. The biggest contraction of the GRDP was exhibited by Central Luzon at negative 13.9%, followed by Calabarzon at negative 10.5%, NCR at negative 10.1%, and Regions CAR, Region 2, and the Central Visayas at negative 0.9% each. Details of the contraction are described in this frame. The region's industry sector contracted by 18.3% and the services sector by 7.9%. In industry, all subsectors suffered contractions led by construction, which shrank by 36.4%. In services, double-digit contractions were noted in 5 subsectors, namely accommodation and food service activities associated with the tourism industry at negative 43.4%, transportation and storage at negative 37.4%, human health and social work at negative 20.7%, real estate and the ownership of dwellings at negative 11.9%, and other services at negative 38.8%. On the other hand, agriculture grew or posted a positive growth rate of 4.2%, along with the 3 subsectors in the services sector, namely financial and insurance, 9.3%, information and communications, 2.7%, and public administration, defense, and compulsory social activities at 1.1%. The information and communication sector was one of the few sectors that reported positive growth in 2020 despite the pandemic. The industry saw the rise of new BPO companies, especially outside Metro Cebu like Dumaguete in Negros Oriental and Tagbilaran in Bohol. Existing industry players also report an expansion of their portfolio with the addition of new accounts. Flexible and favorable external environment were cited as factors that fostered the growth of the industry. Following the pandemic, the BPM companies were able to adapt immediately to the working requirements by implementing alternative work arrangements that enabled the industry's players to continue operations despite the implementation of the enhanced community quarantine. The easing of the inward-looking and protectionist stance of countries like the US also led to more companies in these countries to increase in trade and outsource some of their operations to BPM companies in the region in order to cut costs as the pandemic continues to rage. One of the results of the adoption by BPM companies of alternative work arrangements for part of the workforce is to reduce the requirements for office space and to locate in areas outside the traditional centers where the risk of infection is less. In terms of distribution, the services sector continued to account for the largest share, or 68% of the region's GRDP in 2020. This indicates that services continued to be the dominant economic driver in the region, followed by industry. Agriculture's share of 7.4% was up from 6.4% in 2019. This is shown on the left chart. On the other hand, as shown on the right chart, Central Visayas remains the country's 4th largest regional economy and the 4th biggest contributor to the Philippine GDP. After NCR, which accounts for 1/3 of the GDP, Calabarzon and Central Luzon, Central Visayas GRDP in 2020 was valued at 1.13 trillion pesos. On inflation, the first 5 months of 2021 was marked by rising inflation rates, although this remained below or just within the low-end government target of 2%. Average inflation rate of the region in the first quarter of 2021 was 1%, significantly lower than the 2.7% inflation registered in the first quarter of 2020. On a per commodity basis, of the 11 commodity groups in the basket of goods, 4 had rising inflation rates in the last 3 to 5 months. These were transportation, household furnishing and house maintenance, alcoholic beverage and tobacco, and house water and electricity. Of this, only 3 had inflation rates above the government target of 2 to 4%. These were transportation, alcoholic beverage and tobacco, and household furnishings and commodities related to the maintenance of homes. In the case of the rest of the commodity groups, their inflation rates remained at low rates of less than 2%. For food, rising prices of meat, corn, and fish were recorded in the last 4 months. Meat and corn's inflation rates breached the high end of government's inflation rate of 4% in March and April. Vegetables inflation rate, which was double-digit for most of 2020 and the first 2 months of 2021, fell drastically starting in March 2021 to settle at negative 8.2% in April. As a whole, food inflation in the first quarter of 2021 averaged 1.9%, significantly lower than last year's first quarter rate of 2.5%. Meanwhile, the price of rice continued to decelerate. Across provinces in Central Visayas, Cebu and Siquijor registered lower inflation rates in the first quarter of 2021, vis-a-vis the same period in 2020. Bohol's first quarter inflation rate remained the same as last year's rate, and Negros Oriental recorded a higher inflation rate in the first quarter of 2021 compared to 2020. The rate, however, was well within government target of 2 to 4%. On agriculture, the crop sector continued to enjoy better harvests in the first year of 2021. Yields of palay and corn were up. In particular, palay recorded a remarkable 43% increase in production and corn at 8%. Generally, good weather conditions and the absence of outbreaks of pests were cited as reasons for the better performance during the quarter. The same cannot be said in the case of fisheries sector. Except for aquaculture, lower yields were realized for commercial and municipal fishery. In the case of livestock, hog production continued to improve in the first quarter of 2021. Production of hogs in the first quarter was the highest, at least in the last 2 years, and better than before the COVID-19 pandemic. Higher prices of hogs and pork products in the market encouraged producers to raise production. Goat saw production also up to 4.2% from last year's first quarter level. This was, however, lower than the fourth quarter of 2020's production figure. For poultry, there was a very big drop in production in the first quarter of 2021 after a remarkable recovery in the fourth quarter of 2020. This could be due to the elevated inventories which held back poultry raisers from increasing production. In the case of eggs, production continued to increase, surpassing previous quarters. The first quarter of 2021 saw production up by 14% from last year's first quarter production and pre-COVID output. On power consumption, monthly electricity consumption in the region remained less than their pre-COVID levels as shown by the yellow bars on the graph. Electricity consumption slowed down in the first quarter of 2021 compared to the fourth quarter of 2020's average consumption. Power consumption in the first quarter of 2021 was 91% of that of the 2020 first quarter consumption, as many of the industries and businesses continue to operate at less than full capacity. By type of consumer, electricity consumption of residential users continued to fall in the first quarter of 2021 as more and more people returned to work. Compared to the first quarter of 2020, however, there was a 3.43% expansion in the electricity consumption of residential users in the first quarter of 2021 as working from home became an alternative work arrangement for many workers, which was unheard of pre-pandemic times. Electricity consumption of industrial and commercial users, meanwhile, remained below pre-COVID-19 levels as many industries and firms were still unable to operate at their full capacity. On air transportation, there were lesser number of flights in the first quarter of 2020 compared to the fourth quarter of 2020, as travel restrictions were reimposed on travelers coming from countries and areas with high incidences of infection, especially on COVID-19 Indian variant. This translated to lesser number of passengers as well as cargo carried by the airlines in the first quarter. Unlike aviation, the shipping industry continued to recover in the first quarter of 2021 as all areas, may it be ship calls, passenger, cargo, and container traffic, recorded increased activities from their performances in the fourth quarter. Their levels, however, remain below pre-COVID levels. In the case of cargo, volume of cargo in the first quarter of 2021 was slightly lower than that in the fourth quarter of 2020, as shortage of space in cargo vessels was reported hampering increased growth. There are also increased indications of shipping rates likely to go up within the year, which could weigh down on the subsector's performance. The region's industry authorities estimated the performance of the retail trade industry in 2020 to be only 6 to 70% of 2019's performance. Depressed demand and stiff competition were cited as major constraints to increase growth, even as more businesses resumed operations. While the industry as a whole struggled through the pandemic and the quarantine restrictions, there were performers among the subsectors in 2020. These include those industries involved in the sale of basic food and essential items, products associated with house maintenance, as many people worked from home, and sports and physical fitness equipment, and products that promote hobbies such as needlework, gardening, and the like. A rise in barter trade was also reported involving individual and family entrepreneurs and micro businesses. With respect to investments, Central Visayas recorded a total of 9.09 billion worth of approved investments flowing into the region in the last quarter of 2020. The total was 3 times higher than the total investments approved in the same period in 2020. About 70% of these investments came from Filipino nationals, while 30% were made by foreigners. The top 3 exports of the region in 2020 were electronic products, copper metal, and machinery and transport equipment. On foreign trade, exports continued to enjoy positive growth in the first quarter of 2021. Export earnings of the region was up by 2.3% from last year's first quarter earnings. Imports of the region also expanded in the first quarter of this year after recovering in the fourth quarter of last year, growing at almost 10% year-on-year. As a result of the faster growth of imports vis-a-vis exports in the first quarter, the balance of trade deficit in goods of the region rose by some $126.8 million to settle to $531 million in the first quarter of 2021. At the labor front, unemployment declined further in January 2021 compared to October in 2020, but slightly rose in April. The uptick could be attributed to the rise in the number of persons joining the labor force or looking for work, but which was not matched by the plentiful jobs as many companies continue to operate below full capacity due to quarantine restrictions. An additional 648,000 persons joined the labor force from January to April 2021, more than half of them in April, as optimism of the prospects of the economy grew. In the case of unemployment, underemployment likewise decreased further in January 2021 compared to October last year, but surged in April, breaching the 20% mark. The April underemployment rate was the highest recorded in the past 2 years. Again, the rise in the number of persons looking for work, even as many companies continue to operate below full capacity, could have attributed to the surge in the unemployment rate. For many, the need for immediate work to earn to meet the basic needs compelled them to accept part-time work or to work for lesser pay. Many companies also reported implementing flexible work arrangements that included reduction of work man hours, rotation of employees, and forced leaves. What do we foresee in 2021? The main challenge of the region this year is to stimulate increased demand in order to hasten economic recovery. More than facilitating the reopening and resumption of business operations, it is also essential that consumer confidence is restored to boost consumption. There will be more recoveries as more businesses resume operations and step up activities following and furthering the restrictions. The latest BSP Business Expectation Survey shows business sentiment in Central Visayas is up for the next 6 months. The improved business sentiment was observed across sectors. Inflation is expected to remain subdued for the greater part of 2021, to fall within the government target of 2 to 4%. There could be more escalation in prices of select food items due to supply concerns and rising demand as more people venture out. Philippine weather officials see the La Nina continuing to prevail and bring rains over Central Visayas, particularly in the first half of 2021. This could affect agriculture production, especially if logistical concerns in the provision of inputs due to quarantine restrictions remain unresolved. Outbreaks of pests due to weather variability and diseases, in particular the Asian swine fever, are also threats that could weigh down on agriculture production in 2021. And finally, the labor market is expected to improve further as the regional economy continues to recover and to pick up speed as many companies step up and increase capacity utilization. The Business Expectation Survey affirms this view of an improved employment environment in 2021. In particular, the Employment Outlook Index showed positive for the first quarter of 2021 and the next 6 months, indicating a possible increase in the number of employees in the said periods. That, in brief, is the general economy of Central Visayas. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Molintas. We are in challenging times, but it's good to know that the region remains to have its grip in the local economic front. Cebu is the second largest central urban economic center, and Region 7 is the fourth largest economy in the country today, with a huge presence in IT-enabled services. And now we are at a point when we're seeing more and more of the rise of digital BPO. We've talked about the importance of moving forward in the value chain in an industry that has need to move, or that has a lot of urgency to move from transactional to rule-based work to even decision and strategic work, and thus the need to leverage on the power of digital transformation. To talk more about the subject is the SMB Customer Program Manager of Microsoft Philippines. Friends, let's welcome Mr. Enzo Tañedo.
Hello, it is a rainy day in Manila as I record this. My name is Enzo Tañedo. I am the small and medium business leader at Microsoft Philippines. On behalf of our general manager Andres, who sends his regrets for not being able to join us. Good morning to all. To the officers and the members of the Cebu IT BPM organization, to all attendees of this Transformation Summit, good morning. It is our privilege to spend this time with you. I have been asked to share a couple of thoughts about Microsoft's vision around the digital BPO. I have some slides and some ideas to share with you today, and I look forward to our engagement. So, without further ado, let's take it away. BPO has always been a people, a process, and a technology driven sector. In the early 2000s, I actually worked as part of the BPO workforce for a company known as EPLDT Ventus, uh, part of the PLDT group of companies, which has since been restructured, reincorporated, acquired, transformed, etc. In the year 2021, we still see the Philippines as a leader in the global BPO market. And this is primarily driven by the high cost arbitrage and the talent advantages that we have to offer. However, there are threats to this leadership position, as you see in the graph here. You have aspirants, you have major contenders, and you'll really see that a lot of new low cost players, new technologies, the move away from voice work and into knowledge work. A lot of these factors are taking shape and could potentially threaten the Philippines' status as number one. So when I talk about people, process, and technology, this is where we see the digital BPO. These are the elements which the digital BPO needs to transform in order for the Philippines to continue to remain competitive, if not number one. Let's take a look at a couple of trends and how potentially these trends could be leveraged for our local players and our local business leaders as they expand into new opportunities and drive deeper engagements and stickiness with customers and principals. So, just some tailwinds. Overall, and across many sectors, we see that COVID 19 has lowered the thresholds for outsourcing. Most people, at least from a mindset, if not from a business strategy standpoint, are more open. We've seen an accelerated rate of adoption of technologies and digitization. We see a lot of automation of work processes. We see a lot of IT and business processes opportunities coming up. We see certain sectors which are ripening, in particular healthcare. So we see a lot of digital health use cases coming up, and even offshore gaming operations. So we know that this is a sector which exists within the country legally. And we see that in spite of COVID and the many challenges, this specific sector seems to be operating unimpeded. In fact, in certain areas, we've seen acceleration. Now, let's talk about headwinds. By our own estimates, the local industry has probably had to invest about $120 billion in unplanned costs. So, this is primarily going to be driven by accommodations. If you all remember the early days of COVID, a lot of companies had to get hostels, hotels, and related to house the workers to travel services, so vans, buses, etc. Work from home enablements. I remember particularly in our line of work, it was next to impossible to find a PC. Okay? All the while companies were spending this, contracts were being restructured, if not completely lost. Now, COVID aside, we are seeing the threat of reshoring, wherein companies in the United States or in Europe are trying to take back some of the operations they had prior outsourced to countries such as the Philippines to take advantage of their unemployed workforce and their work from home workforce in their own respective countries. From the technology standpoint, we see great advancements in automation and artificial intelligence, so much so that routinary tasks, for example, picking up the phone to answer a basic question, can now be done by a completely automated process. Finally, we're seeing security. We're seeing cybersecurity and certain risks for countries and places which are underprepared. And in like manner, countries which are more mature, countries which have adopted the necessary technologies, become more attractive, safer alternatives to, to those which are seen as immature. Now, all of this tells us one thing. While the Philippines, along with India, is seen as a leader in the BPO market, that status is not secure. And together, uh, we have to work not only to protect that status, but to continue to make sure that in spite of all of these changes around us, market, COVID, technology, that we continue to drive value for our shared customers so that we continue to be seen as the leader. So, as Andres and I talk to the leadership of large companies and medium-sized companies, we hear recurring themes. These are C-level officers, CEO, CIO, CTO, Chief Marketing Officer, Head of Sales, etc., etc. So I'd like to bounce these off to you, and please react in the comment section, and please write me back if this is something which you want to talk about. So here is a summary of the top 5 top of mind issues for C levels in Philippines BPO players. First, how do I become the partner of choice for certain industries? In the prior slide, I mentioned healthcare, but we're also seeing the rise in outsourced devs for gaming. We also see dedicated backend support for global telcos and global FSIs. So, question is, what do I need to do to become the partner of choice for these companies, be they in US, Europe, etc.? Second, and as it relates to my earlier point, how do I shift my offerings from picking up the phone, answering questions, right? Voice work, very, very transactional, to high value knowledge based work. In this case, leveraging insights and innovative offerings. We hear a lot of the term KPO, processing. And that's top of mind for a lot of the leaders. How do I make sure that I'm seen as that, as opposed to a bunch of people answering phones? Third, as we have broken from the confines of working within the office or within the site, how do I make sure that my people and my process still is productive? When COVID started a couple of years ago at this point for a lot of us, that was the question. How do I monitor? I don't have a shift manager, I don't have a floor manager. How do I make sure that my people are working and not having 1 hour coffee breaks or taking naps? Which brings us to the fourth. Okay? If you're talking about productivity, you're also talking about talent. It's always been a competitive space in BPO, and HR leaders have gotten very, very creative. But as the opportunities change, as the skills requirement changes, as the definition of productivity changes, the question now is how do we lock in and continue to develop talent and compete with what is now emerging as the gig economy, right? You now have the Uber of everything, wherein everything is task based, no commitments, just really quick in and out. BPOs cannot operate that way because that threatens the very existence of the value offering. And finally, again, I alluded to this in the prior slide. As we work away from the office, work out of the site, okay, we're not anymore dealing with the corporate firewall. We're not anymore dealing with desktops which are attached to the desks. We're now talking about work from home or work from anywhere. Inherently, our internet connections are vulnerable, which makes our customer data vulnerable, which makes our devices vulnerable, which even makes our very BPO identities vulnerable. So how should I start thinking about these risks, and what measures should I take to make sure that I am protected, which therefore allows me to protect my employees and my customers as well? Listen to the top 5, top of mind of C levels. We at Microsoft put our heads together, and now it's my privilege to present to you what we see as the new BPO business architecture. I'm gonna run through a couple of technologies, and I hope that they click with you, and I hope that they make sense to you in terms of your priorities and your current business projects or IT projects. First, secure remote work. And this is really dealing with the reality of the fact that most of us are probably going to work outside the office. So making sure that we're able to work anywhere but work safely to protect our identities, our devices, our customer data. Second, digital omni-channel as it relates to serving our principles. Not just email, not just text, but working even all the way through digital, especially with bots and virtual agents. Third, productivity. But more importantly, not just measuring time spent on a task, but making sure that each person is developed, each person is challenged, each person is able to bring their best to work. And that really means leveraging the company information, the company experts, the company mentors. And in doing so, this actually creates stickiness and loyalty. Fourth, operations. How do you operate intelligently now in a digital world? And this is really about platforms, but at the same time, platforms wherein analytics give you actionable insights. And those insights are what either shape your next project or your next strategy or even your actual business model. Fifth, automation. It's interesting to me that a lot of work is routinary and redundant. And what's happening now as a trend is that everything which can be brought down into a workflow, an if then statement, should now totally be taken away from a live breathing human person and sourced out into basic programming, thereby leaving the person to take high level tasks. Sixth, insights and intelligence. And this is really about intelligent platforms, which is built into intelligent operations, but even within the actual business model, the product offering, okay, how do we make sure that it learns and it's something which is trainable? Which connects to my seventh, intelligent customer service. I'm not just talking here about a CRM with a bunch of details. I'm not just talking here about guesswork and feel and relationship, but this is really about predictive analysis, being able to have the next best action for your customer, being able to be personal and personalized, and being able to analyze sentiment, okay, have a good understanding of what it is to really serve a customer. And finally, the dev work which allows all of this to happen within the new BPO. I'm talking about DevOps, I'm talking about Agile, I'm talking about the ability to build without having to come to the office and key in and hook up, etc., etc. Now, all of this obviously is built upon an infrastructure which is not only flexible but secure. And this is how we see the new BPO business architecture. When you consider all of the building blocks in the prior slide, it does seem like a lot, right? You talk about the new BPO architecture. There is a tremendous amount of technology going around, which will impact your people and your process. At Microsoft, apart from thinking of things in terms of architecture, we also like to think of things in terms of a roadmap. Okay? These business imperatives, whether you're talking about the basic secure remote work all the way to data and artificial intelligence, we like to think of these as what you can execute over various horizons. The most basic is the first horizon, which is digitization. A lot of our customers in the BPO sector still have traditional, if not old, infrastructure. And the first way that we help and we serve and we partner is to help take that first step. So if I pull out an example, for example, workforce productivity, the basic horizon around here is starting to embed collaboration tools, starting to embed workflow management, for example, approvals, starting to work in learning management. So in this case, sometimes skilling, and starting to work in digital culture and capabilities. And this is sometimes outside of IT and in partnership with HR, right? Having set that foundation, which is digitization, the next horizon really is innovation, especially allowing greater agility and speed to innovate. Okay? So it's not just technology for the sake of being sexy, but technology for the sake of bringing about transformation. If I pick out one imperative, in this case, intelligent operations, what we're now talking about here is putting in elements of process innovation, teaching or investing to develop automated monitoring, especially across your various processes, and even assuming that the baseline technologies are there, building in predictive maintenance. So being able to say that in X months or after X runs or after XYZ time, this thing might need to be replaced or tweaked or at least lubricated and oiled up, right? These are the places where we're creating little pockets of transformation to create more value. Which finally brings us to the third horizon, which is transformation. If you already have your foundation for adopting all these technologies, if you now have the capability to innovate with speed and with agility, what you are now is a BPO which is able to transform not just yourself, but potentially even your customers, shaping customer behavior, but even, and this is where we go back to 3 slides earlier, shaping the market itself, which is our ultimate goal. If I take a look at, for example, intelligent customer service, where we see ourselves working with you to take the industry and to take the market, is really around recommendations around next best action or prescriptive actions. Imagine if you could tell the customer what they wanted or needed even before they want or need it. And you were making that very intelligent assumption, very intelligent guess based on all of the data points and all the data sets that you've accumulated around them. That is something which is not seen in market today, and that is something which could change the way you serve the customers and bring value to the customers. Okay. So I'm going to leave this slide a little bit up higher. So we're talking now from 5 top of mind of C-levels going into the BPO, the new BPO architecture, now going into roadmap, now going into horizons 1, 2, and 3, which should give you an idea how to realize this architecture over time. And as I bring us to a close, almost, I'd like to show you Microsoft's digital BPO architecture. I go back to my earlier story, right? 2003, working in a BPO, EPLDT Ventus. The people, the process, the technology, that was world class in 2003. As we look at 2021 and beyond, as we look at the Philippines being #1 in the global market, as we think about the changes, the risks, headwinds, tailwinds, trends, opportunities, as we think about CEO top of mind, this is how we at Microsoft feel the BPOs can best position themselves, invest, partner, to be able to be future proof and ready for what's to come. When I talk about everything from the modern workplace, which should accommodate work from home, when I talk about automation orchestration of your process, right? We're not doing it mano-mano or mano-matic anyway. When we think about customers, and not just transactional, but really insights about the customers, knowing them deeper and intimately, and bringing that into an omni-channel delivery system, this is people, process, and technology for the BPO of the future. So that, my dear friends, is our vision. And our vision for the BPO is very much guided by the mission you see in front of you. At Microsoft, we are here to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. We are here at your service. We look forward to partnering with you. And in closing, I just want to say one more time, thank you. Congratulations on a very successful transformation summit. I look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you, Enzo. And it's also a rainy morning here in Cebu. We're all in this together. Definitely, business process management is now moving quickly from analog world towards the rise of robotics, process automation, and artificial intelligence, taking the BPM potential to even higher heights. It will take more time, but I'm already liking what I am seeing So as we go deeper this time from the perspective of NASSCOM. At this time, we will speak more about the developments of NASSCOM in artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain robotics, and virtual reality. He is the research head and one of India's top 40 data scientists. Ladies and gentlemen, I now give you the virtual stage to Mr. Achyuta Ghosh.
Good day to all of you. Thank you, Cebu ITBPM organization, for having me here today. It is indeed a great honor and an absolute privilege to be a part of this event, sharing the stage with leaders of the tech industry. Think we went back and forth on what I should include in the session, given my background as research head at NASSCOM, where I cover emerging technologies in detail. But what we ultimately thought would be interesting to this audience was around the topic of building Cebu as a high value added services destination through learnings from NASSCOM's own 33-year-old journey. So I will present for the benefit of those who do not know us a quick introduction about NASSCOM, followed by an overview of the Indian tech industry. I will also cover India's evolving value proposition and then focus on India's tech journey as enabled through NASSCOM. I will also touch upon NASSCOM's growth playbook, learnings or principles that we have adhered to aid India's tech journey. I will close with a view of the megatrends impacting tech services in the next decade and what kind of opportunities it presents to countries such as India and Philippines. And given the learnings from NASSCOM's journey so far, what Cebu can do to grow in high value added services. A quick recap about NASSCOM. NASSCOM is a not-for-profit industry organization, apex body for the $194 billion IT/BPM industry in India. NASSCOM's members, 3,100, constitute almost 90% of industry's revenue and have enabled the association to spearhead initiatives at a local, national, and global level. NASSCOM's mission is to help the technology products and services industry in India to be trustworthy and innovative across the world. NASSCOM is focused on building the architecture integral to the development of the tech sector in India, opening new markets, building India as a global technology talent hub, and developing overall technology ecosystem, policy, cybersecurity, infrastructure, innovation, CSR, diversity, market development, ease of doing business, creating the overall industry narrative are key priorities for NASSCOM. The Indian technology services industry grew at an annual rate of about 10% in the last decade, outpacing the 3 to 4% growth of the global tech industry. Providers have capitalized on India's innate strength in technical talent. The country produces more than 2 million technical graduates every year, and the cost of each full-time equivalent employee in India lower than most countries. These talent advantages draw companies from around the world. Finally, a strong track record of digital execution has driven outsized growth, with Indian providers growing thrice as fast as global counterparts. The industry's accelerated growth in the decade meant it became a prime driver of the India's economy. 4.5 million jobs, 16 million if you include indirect jobs, over 20,000 companies, 12,500 tech startups, 53 unicorns, 1,300 plus GCCs that employ 1.3 million people themselves and account for a large share of India's FDI and services export and almost 8% relative to India's total GDP. So that's a synopsis of the size of the industry is its diversity. If you look at the different buckets that constitute the Indian industry, each bucket is about $10 billion plus, which includes IT services, software products, BPM, and engineering, right? And it's interesting to note that India has a flourishing local provider base. Indian or India headquartered companies, they account for almost two-thirds of India's revenue. India's 1.4 billion people and $2.7 trillion economy also presents a large domestic tech market, almost $45 billion. And almost a third of India's revenues today come from digital services that includes AI, cybersecurity, IoT, analytics, cloud, robotics, etc. This is higher than what we had expected actually. We do an industry crystal ball gazing exercise every 5 years with McKinsey. And when we did it in 2015, we had projected 20 to 25% of Indian industry revenues coming from digital by 2020. But we have actually beaten our own expectations, or rather, the industry has evolved faster than what we expected it to. Indian tech industry is racing up the high value added services curve. But you actually don't get to move up the value chain without upgrading your value proposition. India's tech advantage in the new normal is a combination of time-tested traditional pillars and a set of emerging levers that we believe will catapult India's brand to a much stronger position globally. If you look at the traditional levers, there is continued focus on optimal cost efficiency, India continues to remain one of the lowest cost countries to deliver tech services. India has unparalleled human capital. India has become the digital talent nation to the world. One of the largest private sector employer in India, employ over 4.47 million talent, out of which about 1.17 million are digitally skilled. So 1 out of 4 tech employees in India are digitally skilled. And this digital skill talent is expected to grow at a CAGR of about 28% over the next 4 years. India has a very diverse and mature ecosystem with over 20,000 players in its landscape. India's physical and digital infrastructure landscape is big, driven by government's massive thrust on investments and infrastructure development. There's a huge domestic market that we have already talked about, and government has been a key enabler in driving India's growth in this sector through supportive policy interventions. Now, what are the new levers that we believe are India's value proposition? The new levers are around catalyzing innovation for impact, making it, India has now made it to the top 50. India now ranks about 48th in the Global Innovation Index. Second is data and digital, the two dominant Ds behind the tech firms consistently strengthening their digital capabilities, adopting deep tech solutions, focusing on usage and impact of AI, cybersecurity, IoT, etc. The third is leadership, trust, and culture, nurturing a scalable, secure, and collaborative environment. Firms with the support of the government is relentlessly working to build trust through transparency and nurturing our inherent leadership strengths. Fourth, robust business delivery models. Blended work models are gaining traction. Emergence of decentralized distributed workforce during the pandemic has enabled businesses to work as usual as well as enhance customer and employee engagements. Last is the emergence of the modern tech-savvy Indian enterprise that we believe will position India as one of the leaders in the emerging new world order. The foundation of this enterprise is built on trust, diverse digital talent, people-first innovation, responsible and ethical use of technology and governance, agility and resilience. So these are the new value proposition levers for India. If you look at India's tech journey as enabled through NASSCOM. NASSCOM was established in 1988, and then NASSCOM worked hard to drive the creation of STPI, the Software Technology Parks of India, in 1991, and the telecom industry redirection also happened. Then NASSCOM launched the first NASSCOM McKinsey report in 1998, which set a very ambitious target, a goal of about 10x growth in the next 10 years. The NASSCOM BPM forum was also launched in 1998. If you look at 2005, as the industry progressed, the SEZ, the Special Economic Zone Act, was introduced. NASSCOM launched its engineering forum. NASSCOM also launched something called as the NSR database, National Security Registry Database. And then the NASSCOM Foundation was also launched sometime in that period. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit us, but then at the same time, NASSCOM established DSCI, Data Science Council of India. NASSCOM also created Emerge 50 and Vision 2020 initiative, which focused on how the next 10 years will look like. NASSCOM also launched the GCC and the Global Trade Initiative at that point. In 2010-2011, NASSCOM launched the ITES Sector Skill Council and the Software Products Initiative. In 2013, NASSCOM launched the 10,000 Startups Program, which focused on creating startups all across the country. In 2015, NASSCOM launched the Perspective 2025 vision. So NASSCOM has always done this 5-year, 10-year visioning exercise. So at 2015, we launched the 2025 vision. NASSCOM then started moving towards digital. India also launched something called as the Digital India Initiative, which tried to build digital technologies in India. NASSCOM launched the IoT Center of Excellence and followed it up with the AI Center of Excellence initiative. As we started moving towards more and more digital skills, NASSCOM realized that skilling becomes very important for the country. And we launched NASSCOM Future Skills in 2018, which aimed at creating 2 million new digitally skilled employees in the industry. In 2021, we saw OSP reforms, COVID-19 impact happened, and what NASSCOM also did was launching the NASSCOM Future Skills Prime, which actually opened up the Future Skills Initiative to all people in the country. So in a way, you've seen NASSCOM evolve throughout the last 20-30 years across different initiatives as the industry grew. So how does it all kind of crystallize itself into learnings for any region, any country aspiring to move up the value chain? There are 10 key growth strategies that I would like to bring up from NASSCOM's 33-year-old journey so far. First, build a very innovative approach to address challenges. In the early days of the tech industry growing in India, NASSCOM hardened its stance on software piracy with innovative print and media campaigns. One of them even had Devang Mehta, a past president, riding an elephant into Nehru Place, a hub for software sales in India, and crushing CDs of pirated software. Um, the second principle is, how India's value proposition largely centered around cost to start with. But as we discussed earlier, how can focused action help change the narrative? So NASSCOM managed to move the discussion from cost to talent, innovation, data and digital trust, new business models, leadership and culture. So new value levers we were able to build into the industry narrative. The third was how to position NASSCOM in key growth areas. With telecom liberalization, many new opportunities opened up in the tech services space. NASSCOM came up with innovative campaigns like Roti Kapda Makan Bandwidth, which translates into food, clothing, housing, and bandwidth, which brought out the importance of internet today in today's world by equating it to essentials such as food, clothing, and housing. Fourth, having an audacious goal always helps. The NASSCOM McKinsey report in 1998 set a $50 billion target for the software exports industry in India. At that time, India was doing less than $5 billion, and the aim for 10x growth over 10 years was a stupendous target. Many people did not believe it to be possible. But you know what? We actually touched the $50 billion mark in 2009, 1 year beyond our projections. And that too because of the global financial services crisis that happened in 2008. Had that not happened, we would have probably met our target. Similar exercises happened in 2008 and 2015, similar 10-year crystal ball gazing exercises. And both times we were on target with the projections, give or take a few billion here or there. Fifth, how do we constantly focus on building and sustaining the brand? NASSCOM took on the effort to differentiate itself through its events, research, and multiple initiatives. The NASSCOM Technology Leadership Forum, the NASSCOM Product Conclave, the Engineering Conclave, the GCC Summit, NASSCOM Annual Technology Conference, Experience AI, Cloud Summit, CEO Summit, Annual Strategic Review, the NASSCOM McKinsey Report. These are globally recognized brands in the technology industry today, whether it be events or it be research documents. And NASSCOM has worked hard to make that happen. Sixth, how do you grow in adjacent areas? We talked about India's diverse portfolio. This has been possible because the Indian tech services industry has been able to move into adjacent areas. What started with IT services industry only quickly expanded to include BPM and then engineering, followed by IT software products, SaaS, and other digital services. So moving into adjacent areas was a trend that India saw. Seventh, how do you identify the right inflection point? How do you look at upcoming trends and launch initiatives to tag on to the trend? For example, the NASSCOM 10,000 Startups Initiative, which NASSCOM launched in early 2013 in partnership with key industry players, with the aim to have 10,000 funded tech startups by 2020. This was a symbol of public-private partnership where NASSCOM tied up with various state governments in India and set up a string of incubators across the country, allowing startups to flourish by giving them space to operate in and access to mentorship, funding, and other support from NASSCOM stakeholder community. Similarly, the NASSCOM Future Skills Initiative was set up with a mandate to train over 2 million technology employees in digital skills. NASSCOM worked with the Government of India to expand that further to include digital skilling for even non-tech firms and freshers out of college, bumping up the target to 4 million people. Today, India has 53 unicorns, and that is a great testament to the startup initiative that NASSCOM has driven all across the country. Eighth, build high impact initiatives that create a difference. If you look at NASSCOM, we have the CSR program that includes NASSCOM Foundation, which is focused on social innovation and digital literacy. We have the NASSCOM Skills Initiative that includes NAC and NACTech, NASSCOM Academy of Competence, and NASSCOM Academy of Competence in the tech sector. Then the Sector Skill Council, Future Skills, and Future Skills Prime. Security focused initiatives such as NSR and Data Science, Data Security Council of India, and innovation initiatives such as COE, IoT, and AI, NASSCOM Industry Partnership Program for startups, etc. Ninth, how do you lead with proactive support in terms of crisis? Every country encounters global and local crises such as natural disasters, cyclones, earthquakes, geopolitical issues such as visas, policy, regulatory issues. How do you take the lead in addressing them? How do you bring the industry, regional or global, together? NASSCOM has encountered many such issues and and has worked to take a very proactive approach to such crisis scenarios. Last, relationships matter. Forging strong connects with stakeholders create a wide ownership of objectives. NASSCOM has been able to bring industry members to compete as well as collaborate fiercely. I mean, if you look at the strategic initiative, typical strategic initiative in NASSCOM, there's a process, sometimes elections to select the right candidates. Then we get the selected members together to thrash out our goals and objectives of the initiative, further break it down into timelines and themes, get individual leaders to own specific themes, and let them work their own entrepreneurial manner to drive and achieve the overall bigger picture. Most trade bodies operate in a similar manner. The difference can be passion, skill, and impact. Um, as we enter a new decade, we see five megatrends for the technology industry. First, in the decade ahead, as organizations adopt digitally enabled business models and launch enterprise wide digital transformations, global enterprise technology intensity, technology spending as a percentage of GDP, is expected to increase by 200 basis points. The growth of enterprise technology intensity in the next decade will offer growth opportunities for service providers who can adapt to shift in supply and demand and tune their sales offerings and delivery models to capture this incremental tech demand. Second trend, ecosystems, platforms where users can meet a range of needs are today blurring boundaries across industries. Ecosystem leaders that are creating disproportionate value today. By plugging into these ecosystems, companies can connect with new customers, gather data, insights on customer behavior, and improving their business processes. Globally, stock markets are rewarding ecosystem players with massive market cap in developed and emerging markets alike. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Alibaba, Facebook. These are great examples of ecosystems. As noted, digital adoption has increased the prevalence of direct to stakeholder models where enterprises forge technology enabled relationships with customers, partners, specialists, businesses, and other stakeholders. The shift to direct to customer business models is underway across sectors as companies rely heavily on digital channels to acquire customers, making transactions, and handle service requests. About 2 billion people today now use digital banking services, for example, and roughly 85% of customer banking interactions are now digital. We expect DTX penetration, the share of sales in digital channels, to increase significantly by 2025 and influence technology spending priorities across verticals. Technology players who enabled building creation of ecosystem for their clients and creating the connect with their customers directly, the DTX model, will actually enable this trend and create business opportunities. Third, we expect global enterprise technology services spending to grow at an average of about 5% every year to reach USD 1.3 trillion annually by 2025. If we include cloud consumption, this market is expected to grow at about 8 to 9% and reach USD 1.8 trillion in the next 5 years. Digital and cloud spending is expected to nearly double over the next 5 years, reaching 600 to 700 billion annually by 2025. Almost half of the incremental spending over the next 5 years is likely to come from data and analytics, AI, cloud infrastructure, platform services, and cloud application services. On the other hand, traditional technology services is likely to decline from USD 650 billion to about 500 billion by 2025, a decline of about 25 to 30%. More than 85% of this decline in traditional spend should come from infrastructure managed services. Other sectors such as application development, maintenance, and even consulting will also decline to a lesser extent. BPM is expected to increase slightly over this period by about 4 to 6% every year. Fourth point being that the next decade will likely see a significant rise in the competitive intensity of the technology services industry, with emergence of four new categories of competitors as lines between services and other tech value pools actually blur. First would be the hyperscalers in the cloud business, include AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. I mean, these guys will scale up. The second category would be next generation SaaS players who are disrupting the traditional way of creating and delivering software. Third would be digital specialists attracting specific revenue pools. And the fourth would be large infrastructure players migrating to services led offerings. We expect hyperscalers and SaaS players to capture or influence nearly 50% of future technology services in the years ahead. The last trend would be around innovating on the operating model and winning the war for next gen talent. How do you define the next normal for delivery? How do you include home shoring, near shoring, gig workforce, automation, work from home, all this put together to create the new model for talent? So these are five mega trends that we believe will influence tech spending. Um, Now that we have gone through all this, how do I apply this to Cebu's unique needs? First is, how do you build yourself as a high value destination? The first point would be to identify your industry positioning in the new growth areas. Technology services sector is set for massive change in the next 5 years. So what are your strengths in these new areas? What are you good at? What are the adjacent markets that you can expand to based on your strengths? How do these opportunities look like? How lucrative are they? What do you need to achieve them? Are there any role models to follow? Second would be, how do you develop your talent model basis your industry positioning? Look, we all know that talent is absolutely critical to grow in the services sector. How are you placed in terms of talent for these opportunities as a trade body? What would you need to do to start an initiative to grow your talent in your target markets? Who are the other stakeholders to be involved in this? How do you get the industry behind a large scale skilling initiative? Funding, tech platform, participation, incentivization, recognition, these are all questions that need to be addressed. Are there examples available that you can strive to emulate? The third would be to prepare for the future of work. The way of work is changing faster than we think. Working from anywhere, gig, culture, innovation, all these concepts will undergo a sea change as companies come back to work post COVID. How do you adjust and take the lead in providing leadership on these topics to your clients? Fourth, how do you encourage local entrepreneurship? MNCs and GCCs contribute immensely in building any tech delivery location, but building a strong domestic industry is also key to market growth and also build the innovation focus. So, what startup programs to initiate? How to promote local entrepreneurship? How can you make a mid-sized player to a big player? How can you enable a small company into a mid-sized company? Last but not the least, how can you build partnerships? How do you build partnerships with client countries from where you can learn new ways of tech delivery? How do you support hub and spoke models? How do you give benefits to partner countries? Technology is one sector that can and is breaking political boundaries. How do you become a part of this movement and integrate yourself into more technology value chains? Every future ready organization today will depend more and more on technology for all their needs. It is up to technology providers to handle this transformation in the next few years. We are at the cusp of a new technology upcycle. Countries such as India and Philippines have a massive role to play in enabling the tech journeys of customer and enterprises. This is all I had to share. Hope this was useful and interesting. I once again thank the organizations for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this platform. I now look forward to the panel discussion. Feel free to ask questions on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. India's outsourcing industry is the biggest in the world and is constantly evolving with advances in technology research. Digital transformation is creating even greater efficiency and better quality of work that keep every business and every organization nimble and profitable. And now that the world is moving faster towards this space, it matters to know that all these and more can be supported and be made possible by technology. With the many people having to work and study from home today, the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the critical role of internet connectivity in a world severely restricted by health safety measures. And to articulate more about the future of technology is a leader and expert who has led market entry, growth, transformation in the areas of telecommunication systems integration and IT services. To speak about the company's mission to deploy end-to-end fiber broadband services and the importance of high-speed connectivity is the Chief Operations Officer of Converge IT Solutions Incorporated, Mr. Jesus Boboy Romero.
Hi, good morning. Morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's a rainy morning for us here and glad to have you here, Boboy, for our Transformation Summit.
And we're very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting us and hope we can share some good insights to the audience. So let me begin with our presentation. Let's start. Before anything else, I would like to give you some background on the company. It's actually an interesting company. It's quite young in the sense of fiber, but has quite a legacy since it started more than 20 years ago in Angeles, Pampanga as a cable TV operator. But for today, we'll focus on what happened over the last year, which has probably been the most challenging and exciting year in my life. A lot of things have been happening with Converge. So, for example, in tune with the difficult times, we've actually done a lot of CSR projects. We supported, the Bangon Batangas initiative during the major volcanic eruption. We've also been supporting many vaccination centers, for example. We've been doing CSR projects in the lines of education and, of course, your usual support to communities like during Christmas and some free rice donations to very challenged communities. We have also worked very hard after seeing the effects of the pandemic on a very heavy digitalization initiative. So many things have been launched. For example, we launched a YouTube channel where you could watch very informational videos about how to interact with Converge and how to better use your fiber connection. We launched our mobile app, which allows you to view bills, pay bills, get status of your account, request for upgrades, request for tickets. And recently, we launched an innovative feature where you can actually see the status of your line. If your line, if your modem is overheating, if the signal levels are low, how many users are connected, things that help you fix some of the problems by yourself without even calling Converge. On the infrastructure side, we've also done a lot of major initiatives. So towards the end of last year, we upgraded our international backbone. It's now the third largest in the country. We have more than 1.6 terabits of capacity today already. We redesigned the network to avoid major outages that brings down lots of customers. So that is what we call the distributed VRAS project. We've also opened our third core backbone node. So we used to have core backbones in Pasig and Angeles. We inaugurated the third core in Makati late last year around December. We've also invested in some new submarine cable systems, the first of which is the Bifrost cable, which will be the first submarine cable to connect Singapore directly to the west coast of the US and landing in Davao by Converge. We were also the first in many things. For example, we were actually the first to launch Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 is very important when you buy a really high bandwidth internet line and you want to maximize the utility. Wi-Fi 6 offers orders of magnitude more capacity than traditional Wi-Fi. We were also the first to upgrade our backbone to 400 gig. And just last week, we announced that we are upgrading it again to 800. So we have the first leg that's running 800 gig backbone in the Philippines up and running. So again, the first in the country. As for the company, we all know we went public last year. We had an IPO in October, and happy to note that our stock is doing well. I think the investors really like the story of Converge. We've also, by the way, completed the first leg of our national backbone. In fact, Cebu today is running on our own backbone already. And in the next few weeks, we will be activating Davao. In the meantime, we're building the other leg, which is the redundancy, the western leg of our backbone. And once we finish this thing towards the end of the year, the Philippines will have one of the newest and most modern domestic high-speed backbones in the country and probably even in Southeast Asia. We've also tried to work hard to continuously improve our service. So, for example, UCLA, which runs speed test, recognized Converge as the most consistent fixed internet service. which means that more than 75% of users are getting, at least 25 megabits, which by the way is the definition of broadband nowadays. 20 meg, 15 meg is not considered to be broadband. And again, just going back to Cebu, we're already operational there. We had a soft launch. We have several thousand customers. And a few weeks back, we did a grand launch. We already have our first business center operating in Mandaue City. So a lot of things happening. Hopefully, all of them good for our customers. But 2020 was, again, as I said, very challenging and, of course, very interesting. So let me walk you through some of them. And, throughout this very difficult time, especially, I believe it was really bad in the second quarter of last year when we went ECQ, we knew that we had to really come out stronger from this experience. And this is looking at the different dimensions of our service. So from support to customer engagement, to the products we offer, of course, our network, and finally, the service itself. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned earlier, we're continuously working hard to have the best network in the Philippines. I mentioned about the technology in our backbone. It's now at 800 gig, which is 8 times as big as a traditional backbone, which runs at 100 gigabits. No? So you can imagine how much traffic this can carry without congestion. The other reason that we are doing this also is that in the event of a fiber cut, we don't want to experience congestion. So if you move traffic from one leg to another, the other leg should carry all of the customers. So that was a very important initiative for us. We are also very much interconnected. So we're connected to all of the operators in the Philippines, probably one of the best connected. Name any telco, we have direct connections. PHIX, which is the government exchange, we probably have one of the largest connectivities today at 20 gig. And we're discussing upgrading that already to 100 gig. We also launched some new hubs abroad. The traditional network hubs in Asia are Hong Kong and Singapore. We have a Taiwan hub. Taiwan happens to be where Google has its mega data center. So that was important for us to be there. And of course, the US. And soon we're building a Japan hub to serve that important market. And I've mentioned the distributed BRAS project, whose objective is to limit the number of customers who may be affected in the event of a catastrophic outage. The third core node, same thing, no? Which is now in Makati. So with this, there is very little likelihood anymore of a massive outage affecting a whole lot of customers. And of course, I mentioned the Bifrost cable system, where we will own 2 fiber pairs. One fiber pair to Singapore and another fiber pair to the US West Coast. Today, this is rated at least 15 terabits, but 18 terabit technologies are becoming mainstream. So again, you can imagine how much capacity we can bring to bear in the Philippines. And since it's a very different arrangement, no, we own a fiber pair compared to traditional consortium cables where you share capacities. We have the ability to upgrade or add capacity without having to talk to anyone else. So that's our own decision to make because we control the fiber pair and the equipment that runs it. This should be up no later than early 2024. Next slide, please. So with these initiatives, of course, the most important thing, having an international network and then a domestic backbone, at the end is to serve customers. And this is where our strategy of Go Deep comes into play. We do need to update this slide a little bit, no? Because we are now operating in all of the Luzon Island. So we went live about 2 months ago in the northwestern side. So we're talking Cagayan, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya. So we call it Go Deep because we want to get to as close to as many Filipinos as possible. In fact, our target is by 2025 to be able to reach at least 55% of Filipino households. And as I mentioned, we are now operating in Cebu. We are on soft launch in Davao as well. We already finished, as I mentioned, the eastern leg of the backbone, and the western leg, which will complete our national network, should be done before the year ends. On the backbone alone, we already have about 69,000 kilometers. I'm not talking fiber kilometers now. When you say fiber kilometers, you take a kilometer and then how many fibers are there. That's not a useful way to count it. So we only count the actual distance of our routes. And again, 69,000 kilometers, one of the largest now in the country. And we do that by being able to roll out very fast. As you can see from the slide, in 2020 alone, we added more than 28,000 kilometers of fiber backbone. And I think in the first quarter, we did about 9,600 kilometers of fiber backbone. Next slide, please. But at the end of the day, technology alone serves to provide service to people. So the other part of what we work very hard on is to provide real value to customers. We have launched very innovative connectivity services that today are still unique in the country, meaning they have not been copied. No? So for example, we launched a product called Fast and a succeeding version called Faster. This runs on fiber, but it runs on the GPON network that we have rolled out, which is very pervasive. Remember, go deep. And because of the lower cost of GPON compared to traditional lease line technologies, we've been able to offer customers, corporate customers, up to 5 times more bandwidth at up to 50% of the cost only. And by the way, this is not something that causes us to lose money. We make a decent margin, but the customers really love it. So for example, banks used to have copper-based lines connecting their branches. Those who are now on our network and have availed of Fast and Faster are running their branches at 10, 20 megabits per second. And again, without breaking the bank. Sorry for the pun. What do they do with it now? As we all know, everyone's trying to go into digitalization. So with this, they were able to deploy new applications that require more bandwidth. So for example, digital kiosks. Many of them do multiple services like bank assurance. So they can do video conferencing for customers who visit the branch and then need to talk to a insurance expert back in headquarters. Physical security. This now allows them to actually send video feeds back to their security center, which was impossible in the old days when they were running low-speed copper lines. Another very innovative service we launched is on the basis of what we call time of day. It's a very simple concept, actually. Nobody is awake 24 hours a day. Not many businesses run 24 hours a day. So for example, government offices are open during the day and would be closed at night. Call centers, those serving the North American market, they're open during the night, but very little traffic during the day. So why would you pay for a 24-hour service when you only need it for half a day? So given that insight, we launched time of day. So you can have double the bandwidth at the time you need it, let's say nighttime for a call center, daytime for a government office or a bank, and you don't have to pay double the price. Unlike before, no? If you wanted more bandwidth, you upgrade to the next plan. So this has saved a lot of customers a lot of money, but they're still getting the service that they deserve. We then subsequently extended it to our SME customers. We launched FlexiBiz, which is going very strong. We all know the SME segment has been hard hit, and now that they're trying to get back on their feet, they're trying to really conserve their resources. So they love the concept of FlexiBiz time of day. So they pay for the bandwidth they need during the daytime when they're open. And then at night, there is half the speed which they can use, for example, if they do have, for example, CCTV and so on. And finally, we extended it to the consumers who really love it. Because today, our lives have changed, no? Like myself, I'm doing this from my house right now. So again, it depends. If you're a normal Filipino family, mom and dad works in a Filipino company or a multinational that operates 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The kids study at home. You need more bandwidth during the day. At night, you don't need as much, but you need enough so that everyone can watch Netflix or HBO Go or YouTube. It also works well for BPO work from home, where we do have a lot of customers today. So as I mentioned, if you are an agent working for a US account, you need a lot more speed during the night. Anyway, you have to sleep during the day. So these are just some of the innovative products that we have launched that really provides value to customers, giving them the ability to live their lives and do their jobs without spending a ton of money. Very unique so far, still the only service in the Philippines today. Next slide, please. And then, of course, during the pandemic, everyone went through a speed bump. I remember in those dark days, we had 100 agents who lived in our call center in Pasig for 2 months. We did not want them to go out because, when they come back, they might infect the whole call center. So they actually literally lived in our call center for 2 months. We provided them accommodations. We paid for all their food, their vitamins, etc. The balance who could not do that because, for example, they have families, we quickly equipped them to work from home. We sent the PCs to their home. We provided fiber to their homes. And that's how somehow, despite the inability to hire people and the surging number of customers, we were still able to support them. Of course, not at the level that we had wanted to. So one of the realizations is that we really need to go hard on the digital approach because that will allow customers to self-themselves without having to talk to agents. And, deloading the call center means the call center can now attend to more of your traditional customers who want to speak to an agent rather than do self-serve. So we have a website where customers actually flocked to during the pandemic. They applied online. They didn't have to talk to anyone. And we served more than half of our customers at that time using the gofiber.ph website, our self-serve portal. We launched the Experience app, as I mentioned. So that one is continuously being improved. It's not perfect. In fact, we will be replacing it again. We hired a new vendor. It was in the news recently, Tata Consultancy Services. So they'll be coming up with a better and easier to use version moving forward. We've also done many things to try to help customers get their bills as easily as possible. You can get it on email. We have a portal where you can log in and download your bill. You can get it, of course, on the app and so on. Even the upgrades, customers can just go online now and upgrade their account by validating themselves. Of course, we don't want bill shock. Mom wakes up and says, why is our internet so expensive? Sorry, mom, I upgraded it. So it's convenient but secure. I mentioned the YouTube channel, lots of videos there. How to optimize your Wi-Fi, what to do when the internet is slow, the many ways to contact us. We even launched a Viber community. Obviously, we have a Facebook page. We have a messenger chat and so on. And we're still looking at more ways and channels to serve, because customers want to be served the way they want to be served. Some of them want to talk to an agent. Many of them in the provinces, for example, they still want to go to our brick and mortar business centers. They want to talk to a human being face to face. But many of us now, we just want self-service, online and digital. So all of those channels are available to our customers. We don't force them into one. We make them available so that it fits your your preference. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we had a tough time last year. We couldn't hire people. Even if people wanted to work, we cannot allow them into our premises. But since then, our customer call center has more than tripled in terms of size. One way we were able to achieve that is by engaging outsourcing partners. One thing we realized is that, with the pandemic, especially in those days, one infection in a building, DOH will close the building. So now we have 5 facilities scattered all over. We have 4 outsourced providers. And of course, we still run our organic call center. We have also doubled our installation capacity. Many complaints then about, very long installation lead times. There were many reasons for that. Again, one of them was there was not enough people. But we fixed that. Today, more than half of our customers we install within the day. And that's a testament to how not only we have increased the headcount, but also how we have worked on the processes and the automation of the field force. We continue to invest in business centers. Again, business centers probably not the lowest cost channel, but many customers still prefer business centers. And again, to us, the main intent is to be able to serve the customers the way they want to be served. We're launching our first business center in Metro Manila, by the way. Metro Manila, we grew to several 100,000 customers without a business center. We had the ad hoc one in our Reliance building, but we're launching our first one soon. It will be a very different approach, and we will announce that when it's finally open. Of course, there was a time, business centers, we call them blockbuster days. The inside was full and many people were outside waiting to be allowed in. Just to share some insights now, we found out many customers, they only want to pay during the due date. And they want to pay physically, so they have a receipt. They have a perception that if you pay to a person, then your money gets credited immediately. We can change that overnight, so we have to support it. So we launched an online appointment system. So instead of going there and taking your chances, so now you can go online, get an appointment, and at that point in time, you are the priority to be served. And we've also had many partnerships, not only in terms of payment, we also now have what we call third-party stores. So in smaller towns and cities where we cannot put up a business center, we've worked with the local businessmen who have a storefront, and we ask them, would you like to have an additional business? Taking orders from Converge customers, taking payments, and maybe taking some requests for support. And we pay them for that. So these are just some of the ways that we are trying to continuously find ways to serve customers better. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we always try to find ways to fix them and prevent them from happening again. So this is just one of those. Of course, now that we're in a very online world, cybersecurity is very important. In one of the studies we looked at, they quantified the effects of an attack. And as you can see in the slide, the financial effect could be massive. We're not even talking about reputation, right? We're not even talking about credibility yet. Just talking about the pure effect in terms of money to a business. And it is increasing. And every day we see a lot of complaints about scams going on. So next slide, please. So we are investing heavily in this area as well. One of the recent platforms we implemented, and we became a member, is in support of suppressing, for example, child pornography. So we have a validated membership with the leading institution there. Our network is protected against distributed denial of service. We've had that, for some time now. We don't offer that yet to customers, but it is used to protect our network against this kind of attacks. We have worked hard to harden our IT security and IT infrastructure because, again, we do hold customer information. We we need your phone numbers. Obviously, we have your addresses because we install lines, your email addresses. So we have a multi-layer security infrastructure. We are, of course, ISO certified for ISMS. Internally, we've implemented Zero Trust. As I had mentioned, we have many people working from home, and some of them actually have access to our back-end systems. And then major investments as well on the human side of things. So onboarded a chief compliance officer. We onboarded an enterprise-wide risk management officer, and of course, our cybersecurity organization. On the platform side, we have some very robust platforms like the DNS we have. It's actually a product that is heavily used by US government and the US military. So we have a very secure DNS platform. It's not only secure, it's also scalable. It's Secure 64. So if you look it up, you'll see that most of the users are government and military. And that's what we have in our network. Next slide. So just to reiterate on the digital side, so that's what we call our Go Digital approach. So we have the website, social media. By the way, we're not a telephone company. So, we cannot have many landlines just like the other providers. But we do have something called click-to-call. So it runs on a technology called WebRTC. On your mobile phone or on your PCs and laptops, you can actually contact the call center of Converge. Of course, you still need the minimal internet connection. It works very well, by the way, on mobile data. So it's obviously almost free of charge for customers when they try to call our call center instead of making mobile to landline calls, which we all know is very expensive. We also are doing email marketing now. We onboarded a CRM platform, a sales automation platform, and we're using that to try to go back to the customers who had applied with us before, but unfortunately, we were unable to serve. And as I mentioned in the Go Deep strategy, we are continuing to build out all over the country. And maybe what I forgot to mention there was we're not just building out in old areas, no? We're also adding more capacity in new areas, in our existing areas, because there are many places where we run out, we get sold out. So Go Deep is not just about going to new places. It's really more about having more capacity where customers need it. And I mentioned about the YouTube channel, the Viber community, and so on. Sorry. Hold on. I had an incoming call and it kind of messed up my screen. I'm sorry. Okay. So again, for us, the future of work means that providers need to continuously innovate and develop services that address real customer problems. In Converge, we don't really like developing products just because it's the trend or it's what some consultant says is what customers need. We always work on what customers say they need. We work on the insights provided to us, and then we try to find crazy ways of developing products and services that have never been imagined before. I remember time of day when we were doing it, nobody in our current roster of vendors could help us, and they also said that never been done before. So some of the things we do are not very easy because there are no comparisons. No, you cannot find them anywhere else in the world. For example, I did not talk about one flavor we have for direct internet. We call it upload. Many of us are familiar with asymmetric, right? But typically when you say asymmetric, it's download. You have a faster download speed than an upload speed. But when you're an enterprise, sometimes it's the reverse, no? You need more upload than download. So what examples are there, no? Backup, right? Many of us need to secure our data. So we need to back up our data. And when you're backing up data, you're uploading it. You're not downloading it. If you're a creative agency, you create videos and you need to send, big files, or engineering companies, CAD files, you need more upload capacity. So we launch another crazy product. We call it DIA Upload. So your upload speed is double of your download speed. And again, priced so that it doesn't break the bank. So these are, again, the ways that we are able to help our customers by understanding problems and coming up with real solutions. So I think that would be the last of my formal slides. So again, as I mentioned, we think technology is really there to serve people. It's useless to deploy technology for its own sake. For us, it's so that we can help uplift the lives of our countrymen, of Filipino businesses, and even the government by helping them improve the way they access information, solutions, opportunities, and even entertainment. Go fiber! Thank you.
Thank you, Boboy. And today we are seeing another glimpse of the future of technology and your company's commitment to provide pure end-to-end fiber internet connection with greater speed and bandwidth from the network facilities to every home. I'm sure our viewers are now even more thrilled to know about the possibilities and opportunities along with the next level play with the local economy, digital transformation, and technology. At this point, we're now moving to the final portion of today's summit, the panel discussion. We are still mining your questions from Zoom and from those watching us live on Facebook, and are now about to process them through our speakers' thoughts, insights, and perspective. And just like the previous days, today's panel discussion, we will have the Executive Director of SID.O as moderator. It's not my brother, but we look alike. Friends, let me now turn over the proceedings to Mr. Buddy Villasis.
Thank you, DJ. This is actually a star-studded summit. You see Yul Brynner and Telly Savalas in tandem. Good morning once again to our panelists. Welcome, Dr. Molintas from NEDA, Mr. Enzo Tañedo from Microsoft Philippines, and Mr. Ghosh, Mr. Achyuta Ghosh from NASSCOM in India, and of course, Mr. Boboy Romero from Converge. Welcome to the panel discussion. Dr. Molintas. Thank you, Boboy. Dr. Molintas, you made a very complimentary presentation to the discussion of Dr. Alvin Ang on day one of the summit. How positive are you with his national forecast? And as you were saying, Cebu will lead the region on possible growth despite the odds that we are facing.
Yes, thank you for that question, Buddy. Yeah, I'm positive, I'm affirmative of the growth, economic growth of the region, especially with the rollout of our vaccination program, the implementation of our infrastructure projects, which are already ongoing right now, and so the limited quarantine restrictions. So these three conditionalities would ensure the growth of our economy this year. In fact, we saw first quarter growth already with respect to investments, with respect to exports, with respect to power consumption. We already saw that for the first quarter, Buddy. So thank you very much.
We've seen your slides, no? We have negative growth, but still better than zero, despite the pandemic. So hopefully, we're hoping that things will the figures will get higher as we enter the third and the last quarter towards 2022.
We hope for that, buddy.
Enzo, how are you?
Mayuman, sir. Very well, thank you.
Well, that's good. Somebody from the audience was asking, you mentioned about gaming earlier. Does it refer to Pogo?
To clarify, so there are gaming who does the social gaming, so the games. So we
Yeah.
see a lot of that. But to some extent, there are legally registered Pogos who do operate as well. So we work with them both.
Okay, so you work with them, huh? And what's the volume of market that you have here in the Philippines, considering the advent of Pogo since the past 3 years? Would you be kind enough to share?
Well, actually, sir, in all humility and with respect to our friends at Converge, the telcos and the carriers actually know them better. To be completely honest, Microsoft, we're reaching out and we're building that business. I know the longer and more tenured personalities and experts, such as those in the room, probably know them best. I would say that if you look at gaming in particular, we probably haven't done too much. It's very early, and a lot of the industry is still transforming. With the other flip, which is BPO, the traditional BPO that we know, I'd say that Microsoft has been a longer partner. Although for the cloud portion and for the digital transformation portion, still baby steps. So we're probably in Horizon 1, maybe Horizon 2 at most for a lot of the companies, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're transitioning into KPOs and more focused industries now. I believe it's time for us to adjust and build talents locally. And with the entry of Converge, I'm sure they will play a key role in this development.
Agreed.
Mr. Ghosh, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine as well. It's good that you came all the way from India to be with
Yeah.
the Cebuanos today.
Yeah, same here. Early morning wake up call.
I was looking at your slide, especially the last one, and we're looking at a major collaboration that Cebu could play well with, starting with NASSCOM. It's a very good wake-up call. You know, how can Cebu be a choice for higher value tech services? A great question. I think you hit the nail right in the head. So we have a lot of work to do relative to that. What do you think? Are you positive with that?
Yeah, of course. I think countries, no one single country can actually serve the entire value chain. What we have realized, and the value chain across services, across sectors, across geographies, right? It's very important for regions to cooperate, work with each other, hand in hand, build a a hub and spoke model or a partnership model. And I'm sure Cebu can have a big role to play, whether it is with Philippines at a whole level, or with India, or at any other country. In fact, we are doing a study which we will publish in the next few months, which is on locations for engineering services. And we're not concentrating only on India. We are trying to look at across the world, what are the top 30-40 locations, and how could they work hand in hand? I mean, none of those locations are independently possible to address everything. But is there a way, if one company or one country or one location is maybe great at, say, cloud engineering, but not at other regions, other services, so how can they work with each other? So I think that's the intent. And we hope Cebu has a role to play in these kind of activities.
Yeah, I believe so. It's a lot of we have a lot of room actually to work on this one. The question would be, how soon can we do it? I believe with our connection to NASSCOM, you can give us a helping hand
Sure.
as we head towards this direction.
Sure, especially given that our addressable market, the traditional services market that we service is going to come down by 25 to 30% over the next 5 years. So that will be a big hit for most companies who are not willing to change and look at doing things differently, target new markets, so on and so forth. So that's the imperative for all of us to, get into that fifth gear, hyper gear, and get moving.
Thank you. And once again, Mr. Boboy Romero will play a key role relative to this development, given your aggressive expansion in Cebu. It's giving a lot of hope. I was looking at the comments on the chat box, and people are excited on your rollout here. Somebody was asking how fast is the TAT for installation of connectivity?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So our current target is to install at least 75% of applications within 3 days. That's because we also consider the availability of the customer. And we typically install 95% within a week. But as I had mentioned, as long as everything is in order, we're actually able to install close to half now within a day or 24 hours.
Okay. Would any of our panelists want to ask any question among yourselves or within the group? Okay. We don't want some dead air. So one more thing, Microsoft is working well on a fully digital transformation. And looking at your slides, Enzo, I don't know how fast could local BPOs or startup BPOs catch up with the direction that you were based on your presentation. How positive are you with that?
When we look at the BPO, sir, more often than not, telephony, networking, and to some extent, they even operate their own server farms. The conversation we look at now is obviously the COVID impact, right? So
Yeah.
now you can't work from home, some workers are remote, and that's really where we partner with telcos to work from home. But what's interesting now is most BPO operators understand that they have to deliver a result. And traditionally, you deliver that result with warm bodies. Lagyan mo ng taong upuan, sasagot ng telepono, it happens.
Okay.
Most BPOs now are asking, how do I automate certain things? So kung ang metric ko is time to resolve or the time to escalate a ticket or how to find the expert for level 2, level 3, lots of BPOs are now thinking, how do I do that? So that becomes an interesting conversation. The other conversation is about data. So a lot of BPOs have a lot of data, terabytes and terabytes of data. And they're trying to figure out, how do I turn that data into something either I can sell to my end customer or I can improve my operations with. So the conversation has changed. I would say that in the game of speed, syempre, it matters how soon you can go to market and how soon you can sell. But ang nakikita ko now is a lot of the BPOs are thinking differently. A lot of the BPOs are thinking globally. How to be number one, not just in market, but how to keep the country number one. And a lot of BPOs already start to think industry. How do I serve healthcare? How do I serve FSI? How do I serve X, Y, and Z? So I would say it's a different conversation we're having now versus 2 or 3 years ago. I would say also it's exciting because even the leadership has a greater appreciation, meaning to say outside of IT, that the CMOs, the COOs, even the CEOs have a different mind about it. So para sa akin, sir, that is what is most exciting about partnering and working with our BPOs here.
Okay, thank you, Enzo. This is a question from our audience, and I think Boboy could answer this one, or maybe Enzo also. How can you rate our IT infrastructure in Cebu and the Philippines in general in terms of readiness in work from home versus brick and mortar setup? Or working on site, and what are your insights that needs or improvements as we look forward working from home? Most people are actually thinking of the gig economy now, and they wanted to work from home, I believe Converge can really help them out with this one. Your insights, Mr. Romero, please.
Yes. From my perspective, no, as long as there is fiber, then it is more than enough. In fact, you can even say at par with global standards. The technology we use here is no different from what you see in Singapore, Hong Kong, or even Korea.
Okay.
We use GPON, gigabit PON. I talked about the technology in the backbone. So as long as it's there, then it already is a big part of making sure that you can be a productive person who's working from home. But you have to look at the full picture. No, it's not just the fiber to your home. I talked about the backbone. And then you have to talk about, for example, peering, meaning you have to be interconnected with as many networks as possible. That's why to us, I mentioned, PH Open IX, we're one of the largest participants. Microsoft, for example, we have peering with Microsoft. We have CDN, content distribution networks with Microsoft. They bring the content as near to the users as possible. So the next layer then just becomes, how well can telcos like our company and the others provide a reliable service, something that's always on, right? And that's something I was not able to talk about. We're working hard to move from being very reactive to more proactive, trying to prevent problems from happening. But these are Philippines, no? Many things we cannot control. Unfortunately, typhoons, for example. When we analyze our fiber cut incidents, there was a joke going around. We need to lobby for a truck ban, because many of the fiber cuts are because of trucks either dragging fibers or, ramming poles. So then the next question becomes, how quickly can we repair problems? So unfortunately, I'd like to say that you can always repair them as soon as possible. We're trying to bring everything to within 24-hour repair time. Okay? So just like anything else, just like in any enterprise, if you really will become a permanent work from home person, you need a base service, let's say a fiber connection. If you can afford it, get another fiber connection. If you cannot afford it, if you're lucky enough, and by the way, in my area, I'm lucky enough, I have very strong signal from Dito, Globe, and Smart. So my backup here is really wireless. And I invested in a wireless router. So bottom line, what am I saying? All the technology is here. We are not left behind in technology. Us telcos just need to work hard to make our services more reliable. And in the event that we have a problem, that we can fix them as quickly as possible.
Wow.
Most of Converge works from home. I have been working from home since March last year, and most of our people, and probably maybe 20% of our call center. And, it's working. BPOs, many of them engage us to provide work from home fiber lines. So I think, we're getting there. Now Cebu would have 3 service providers, right? Globe, where I used to work. I love that company. I was there for only 25 years, PLDT, and now Converge. So between the 3 of us, please expect that we will all work hard to make sure that, we can really make Cebu another hub, if it's not yet a hub.
Wow. Thank you, Boboy. That was a very promising scenario that everybody could look up to. As you know, we have audiences not just in the Philippines, but across Asia. No, some Filipinos watching overseas, but some of our audience are from the provinces also who have very limited connectivity. There is a follow-up question for Boboy. When are you coming to Cagayan de Oro City?
Cagayan de Oro City, we are gonna be online live this quarter.
Oh, great news.
Yes. We call the optical distribution network, that's the fiber, that's going on already, finished in some places. The backbone, as I had said, is already gonna be fired up to Mindanao before the end of the month. So, within this quarter at the latest, maybe earlier, hopefully, we're working hard to be there earlier.
Okay, so the people from CDO expect that soon. Converge is working on it. Mr. Ghosh, let's look at your crystal ball. Somebody was asking, what does your crystal ball tell you regarding advanced economies, just like the US market, backpedaling to some extent on outsourcing for jobs for their unemployed? Will this be just a minor dent for India and the Philippines in the next 5 years?
So I've been in NASSCOM since 2008, and in between I was not there for a brief period. But I know this discussion has been going on since then, and even before that, right? Whichever government there is, whichever time it is, it's always there. Local jobs. But at the end of it, the fact remains that U.S. technical talent is on the lower side. They have a shortage of technical talent, and that's a fact that you cannot change by putting restrictions. You can only change by training people, skilling people, getting them into the tech sector, so on and so forth. So these kind of restrictions actually affect the competitiveness of industries, of companies. And what we see is that companies will always decide, take their call depending on, which way they want to grow. I mean, growth is the most primary criteria for all organizations. So what we see is that in case restrictions come in, more offshoring happens. So it's kind of a win-win situation, right? I mean, if there are no restrictions, then it is onshoring plus offshoring. If there are restrictions, then there is more offshoring happening. So I don't think that situation is going to change. Companies will always decide for themselves. One, two is it's very important for us to continue to have an open channel, a set of dialogues with US and all these other countries, right? Just to enforce the thinking that what they will miss out. At the same time, I wish Philippines and India could come together on this, because these are issues that affect us both as a country, right? So I look forward to seeing whether Philippines and India can work together to address these common issues across these countries going forward. So I think that's where I would come from. But I don't expect these discussions to go away in the next 10 years also.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. That was a great statement. At this point, I want to get the final words of the panel, starting from Dr. Molintas. Looking at your last slide, you have a very good outlook for the rest of 2021. Cebu's economy is coming back. Hopefully, what they call now as the third wave won't hit us again. May I get your final statement, Doc, before we adjourn this panel discussion?
Yeah, thank you very much again, once again, Buddy, for that. I'd like to congratulate Steve O for organizing this event. This summit is really very, very informative, especially for me, who is a newbie in Cebu, coming from Baguio. So I am so to see that our private organizations like CBO are doing this informative sessions such as this summit. We're so optimistic about the economy for the next probably next year and next 6 months probably. Yes, because again, as I mentioned a while back, construction is already ongoing. There is increased imports and exports, and that is a good business economic-wise. That is a good action among our organizations and industry in our in the city of Cebu and Central Visayas. So again, congratulations for organizing this event.
Thank you, Dr. Molintas. Enzo, may I have your final statement? I don't want to encroach into your lunch also. I know it's raining in Manila, and it's the more it rains, the more it makes you hungry.
No problem at all, sir. I just want to say thank you to the organizers, echoing Doctora. Thank you also to Sir Boboy and Mr. Ghosh. Nice to be on the panel. Nice to hear from you. So just want to echo the digital transformation story. In closing, most people try to do the most painful problem or the most pressing challenge. So siguro ngayon work from home yan. So I would encourage everyone to think out and reach out to partners who can help. Maraming ka-chat si Sir Buboy sa chat, humingi ng tulong. So if work from home is the start of your digital transformation, by all means start there. But in closing, I also put a link there for everybody. I am 100% on board with the skilling initiative. Microsoft has our own skilling initiative. And in Cebu, by the way, I see a lot of devs and I see a lot of very technical people. So much so that these talents get pirated by Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So comment on the infrastructure. Infrastructure is growing. Thank you, Converge. But the skills are very exciting to see in the young people. So I would encourage, if you are a young person, whether you have a college degree or not, libre lang mag-aral. The skills of tomorrow are probably not being taught in college today. So please find a way to skill up. The global market is open. You could be working for someone in Singapore out of Cebu. You could be coding for someone in Japan out of Cebu. So think global and prepare yourselves for tomorrow. So that's my personal message on top of my company message. Maraming salamat po sa tanan.
Thank you, Enzo. Mr. Goss, I'll have your final words. And of course, going back to your old slide, please, let's look at something very good with NASSCOM and Cebu. May I get your final statement?
Sure. I think just three, points that I have. First of all, thank you to the organizers and the fellow speakers. Thank you for having me here. Great learning and hearing from all of you. I think three takeaways is one is the technology industry has demonstrated a tremendous amount of resilience in the face of COVID. That's something that we have seen in the last 1 year. I mean, many countries have managed to grow the technology services. India has managed to grow. I'm sure, Philippines also has seen growth in pockets. So resilience is key, moving to a work from home model and, able to deliver services at the same level of productivity that itself, calls for a round of applause for the industry. We are entering into this new normal, this new world where the good part about it is that more consumption of technology will happen. People who were probably consuming lower amount of technology will consume more. At the same time, many of the old work that we used to do will go away and the new work will start coming in. New kinds of services will coming in, new demand will come in, right? So we cannot rest on whatever we were doing in the past and hope that things will continue to remain the same. Even though there will be more growth from a technology standpoint, the work will be different. The last part is that talent, partnerships, and innovation. These three will be the three most important pillars on which winning countries versus those who do not win will be decided, right? So as a city, as a nation, I think you should always focus on these 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goss. Mr. Boboy Romero, I believe you'll play a key role in all the things that we are trying to do here. May I have your final statement?
Yes. Converge firmly believes that the Philippine market is still very much underserved. If you look at data shared publicly by all the providers, we're not close to having enough capacity to serve the customers who are in need. So our coming into Cebu is really to be able to help us to add more capacity, to be able to serve more customers, and of course, to give customers a choice. And maybe just to end my my short statement, let me give you 2 stories. One, I have 2 friends. They work in the tech industry. One is BPO, one is a high-tech vendor. They have been working. One is in Bolinao, Pangasinan. Another is in San Narciso, Zambales. They've been working from beach for more than 3 months now. That was only possible because luckily Converge had fiber in those places where nobody else had. So, that basically allowed them to say, Let's move out of the crazy city. Especially, we had another lockdown, remember, in Manila, I think around March, April. Second, many of my friends, when they call me, Boboy, pare, boss, please, my line is down. I need to log in for a important meeting. Or my son, my daughter will be absent from school. So we're very cognizant of the role we played. You know, we look at the mirror every morning. We like what we see because 5 years ago, this was not possible. I think it was possible because, you know, we did invest blood, sweat, and tears. And now it's a very vibrant market, you know. You can get great services from all of us. I mean, not only from Converge. And we also cognizant that when people buy our service, you know, it doesn't matter anymore if you're just a residential customer. It is just as mission critical for you. So we hope to bring the same to Cebu. Again, you know, just to be upfront, we're not perfect, but we try very hard. Thank you.
That's very reassuring, Boy. Thank you very much, everyone. We had a very fruitful discussion. We look forward to have more of you in our future activities soon. At this point, I'd like to give you back to DJ for the final words of the day. DJ?
Thank you, Buddy, and our panel of experts and speakers. It's been a great morning of conversation about the next level play. We're now on our third day, and tomorrow we are moving to the fourth and final day. We will share and focus more regarding updates specific to innovation and ecosystem development, the future of office, research and development offshoring for high-tech industries, and the next level play on data security. Please continue to monitor the Facebook page of SIB.O for winners of exciting prizes brought to us by Globe and Cebu Safari. It's been an interesting exchange of ideas, insights on how we can better synergize and make the big leap forward. My name is DJ once again, this year's conference chair, and on behalf of the chairman and board of trustees of SIB.O, thank you for your participation and engagement. And see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for day 4 and the final day of the 2021 Transformation Summit. Good afternoon.